Good afternoon to you. Welcome. Today I have an interesting guest who's going to hopefully provide a robust discussion on all things of creativity and wildlife and trying things new. Graham Wallington is the Chief Executive Officer of WildEarth. He's been broadcasting live for more than 20 years already. And currently during this COVID lockdown all around the world, WildEarth has been live on many platforms and has created quite a global following. This morning I saw, very early this morning, just after 6 o'clock, 5,500 people were live all at the one time watching the Kruger National Park and Tswalu as well. So please join me for this conversation. It should be fascinating. It should be an interesting conversation about nature, about technology, and about interacting with guests. So please stay with me. My name's Alex McPhail, and this is High Performance Teams. Graham, good afternoon to you. Welcome. How are you today?
Good afternoon. I'm good, thanks. Thank you very much for having me. It's an honor and a privilege to be here.
Oh, the privilege is all mine. Thank you so much for your time today. I know you've run a very busy operation there, and it's certainly been going a long, long time. But we're going to get right into the weeds of lots of interesting things. But tell me, let's just go back if we can. Can we just backpedal a few years to kind of your formative time? I know you spent a lot of time in the bush in the Kruger Park as a kid, but tell me about that sort of experience of your life and where it all started, enjoying nature, animals and diving, etc.
Yeah, so I was very privileged and grew up in Johannesburg, South Africa, and had the privilege of being able to make quite a number of trips when I was a youngster with my grandparents and my parents every year, a couple times a year, to the Kruger National Park, as well as also to the Okavango Delta and camping trips all over South Africa in the various different beautiful reserves that we have and around. And I think that from a very young age, the whole idea of going on a game drive has always been something that was very emotionally important to me and my family. In fact, I learned how to drive, on a game drive in the Kruger Park, as did my brother, and I think that that had a big impact. But then what happened was that I started getting very involved with scuba diving while I was in high school, and then as I matriculated, I was able to get to become an instructor for NAUI, for one of the associations that run instructors. And this allowed me to avoid a tertiary education and disappear off into the world while all my friends were studying, useful tertiary degrees and various things. And I was very lucky. I got to travel all over the world teaching people how to scuba dive, and really for I don't know, for about 4 or 5 years in some of the most amazing places. Sure. But I really that look in someone's eyes when they come out of the water for the first time on being on a dive, and that experience that they've had where they've literally just been transformed by seeing a whole other world and actually seeing when human beings actually connect with nature, when they empathize with it, is something that I just have not grown tired of. And really, this was, I don't think I even fully realized it in the beginning when we first in 1998 put the first webcam on a waterhole in Djuma Game Reserve in the northern Sabi Sands. And yet that feeling of knowing that 24 hours a day that there are people all over the world that are able to connect with nature through what you're doing is very addictive, and I haven't been able to shake it off. And that's 22 years later, still doing the same thing, trying to get better and better at it, of course. Sure. But it's yeah, I guess that's my passion.
Okay, well, you mentioned a lot of things that I'd like to discuss in a bit more detail, and also just to slow it down a little bit too. I can see you're very passionate and excited about it, and let's just talk about the scuba diving, because it's something that fascinates me too. I enjoy scuba diving. I qualified as an advanced diver, but when I was about 15, 14, somewhere there in high school, there was an exposure at my school. So there's two aspects that go with scuba diving for me. I mean, one is this sort of fully submersive experience of being amongst the animals, the fish and the marine life underwater, where you shouldn't typically be for more than 30 seconds. But the other is the sort of, the wonder of being able to be there for more than 30 seconds. So this exposure I had was to just have this equipment in the swimming pool at the high school and just go underwater for a minute and just try it out. And that really captivated me. And years later, I managed to do my proper underwater training, and that was wonderful. So it is a great experience. And then I can associate with that feeling of coming out with your mind sort of opened. You've just seen a new part of life. So what was it that took you then from diving to then going back into the bush? Because you took an extended tour in the diving phase of your life. And then how did you get back into the bush side, or why did you stop the diving?
Okay, so because we've got time, I'll tell you the story. No, actually, I can't tell the whole story. It might be a little bit off, but there were two gentlemen that were tourist guests on a boat that I was managing, a liveaboard boat in the Solomon Islands, the Bilikiki, and they were two stockbrokers from New York, very successful. At that stage, I would now call them young. They were about 30. I was 21 actually, and the end of it is that these guys, after 2 weeks, we got off to a bit of a rocky start, and with them with some rather poor behavior, but we then started to get to know each other and chat, and they said, 80% of American millionaires made their money out of real estate, and you need to stop this messing around with, this diving, and go and do something useful and get into real estate. And I think I don't know if I was bored. I think what had happened was that I'd had 5 years of traveling around, or 4 years of traveling around the world. I think I was 22 at that time, and I just sort of thought, I'd achieved what I needed, what I could really achieve in diving, and I thought now it was time to do something else. And so I came back to South Africa, and I started in real estate, and began working as an estate agent, and eventually had my own real estate marketing business, and that was very successful until it wasn't, and I had my first business failure, as this defined as being the business blew up essentially, but it was the only time that I ever had what I now look back on and realize was a nervous breakdown. Essentially, just lying in bed in a fetal position, not knowing what to do, and just really being panicked and scared because I couldn't pay the bills, and the business was collapsing and did collapse, and so I did the only rational thing I knew how to do, any solution I could come up with, which was to take my gold credit card and run away to Grand Cayman in the Caribbean, and spend 3 months diving, and it worked like a charm, Alex. If you ever find yourself in the same position, strongly recommend it as a solution. In fact, 3 months lying on the beach in Grand Cayman is pretty much a solution to almost all problems, it turns out.
Good tips. Thanks, Graham. Good tip. But okay, so now I think we've skipped past another integral part before you get into how you started with that first webcam, etc. Because when we were speaking last week, you were telling me about programming your first flight simulator as an 8-year-old. I mean, before there was Microsoft Flight Simulator, you made your own game.
Yeah, but I need to first of all put a big fat caveat in here. There was no graphic interface, so there was no horizon. There was none of that. It was just numbers. Basically, if you pushed the power up, and then at a certain speed, which was just a number, okay, you could then change your angle of attack, and boom, you were flying, and then it was just numbers after that, okay. With a bearing, and so it was very basic.
But it sounds quite advanced for an 8-year-old. So we'll give you that latitude that there was no graphics bit, but it was also in a time when graphics weren't very strong either. So okay, but I just want to highlight the point that you had an inquisitive childhood and formative years. Okay, so now you've been to the Grand Cayman, and you've maxed out your gold card, and you've had your 3 months.
So what happened was I came back to South Africa, and I wanted to do something else other than property. I just hadn't, I felt like property development and marketing, there just wasn't any heart to it. It might be good for business, and maybe you get rich doing it, but it's not what I wanted to spend the rest of my life doing. And so I initially thought I wanted to get into media. And my first thought, which was the worst thing I ever came up with, was I thought, well, I noticed how people were so fixated on kind of these horrible pictures and sort of really disturbing imagery that wasn't publishable in the mainstream media. So I thought, and such an interesting crime, so I thought, well, I'm going to make a magazine that kind of not follows, but is all about serial killers and crime. And so I went to the Star newspaper archives, and basically did an agreement with them that I could use for very little money all of the images that they had accumulated over the years, but which they could not publish because they were just terrible. And after about half an hour of going through these pictures, I just stood up and just said, "Thank you, no thank you." And walked out of there, and I just thought this was the worst idea I'd ever had. Honestly, to this day, I'm still disturbed by some of the images that I saw that morning. I mean, it was just horrible. And so, so I thought, but I'm going to stick with media, and obviously with having spent a whole lifetime of having an interest in computers and programming. I started a little business called the Internet Publishing Company with a friend, and we did websites for people. Okay. And I would sell in code, and it was a challenging time because people would say, I don't even have an email address. I've got a fax machine. Why would I want a website? What am I going to do with a website? You know what I mean? And it was hard. It was hard to fight against the fax machine in those early days. It was an incredible device capable of so much. And so I started this little internet publishing company, and then what happened was that first the MIT had a webcam looking at their coffee machine, so that all the people in the building didn't have to go all the way down to get a cup of coffee. You only need to discover that there was no coffee in the coffee machine. And that was the first webcam ever, and that was intriguing. I mean,
Wow.
sounds ridiculous now, but that idea of being able to see what was going on in coffee over the internet, really? That's just like magic. And then a real piece of magic happened, and it was called the Amazing Fish Cam. And somebody had taken their a video camera, and pointed it at their fish bowl or fish tank in their house, and we're broadcasting this onto the internet. Now that alone really blew me away, Alex. But when it sold for $500,000 to Nets, I thought, what? The world has gone crazy. I could do better than that. And so myself and Paul Clifford, who later became my partner in Africam, we decided, well, to hell with it, let's just go and put in a webcam on a waterhole. That's so much better than a fish cam.
Sure.
And Reuters came and did a story, and this was in August of 1998. And within 6 days, it was the busiest website on the African continent, and it just kept growing from there. I think the following year, in 1999, we did 45 million page views in 1 month, which today would be a big achievement.
It is.
But in 1999, it was like
mind-blowing. Okay, Graham, I'm going to pause you there for 1 second. I'm just going to put this little clip here of a clip that's happened this week on your current situation. Here's now one of your rangers giving a discussion.
Yeah, this is Thandi. She's a leopard that is really, really close to our hearts, and as you can see, she's there with her young cub, which she had 2 cubs. We hadn't seen them now for, I don't know, a little while, maybe a month. And obviously this happened on the weekend and was a big deal for all of us. And there it is. There's the cub there. There's that little youngster who's looking super good. He or she is fat and healthy. Obviously, it's a shame we lost the other one. I've known her, Thandi. Now, Thandi's mother was Karula, who was the queen of Djuma, and we followed her for 12 or 13 years until she sadly passed on. And I knew her mother as well. So I knew Safari, which was Karula's mother. So basically, we've been following these cats for 4 or 5 generations in that little cub there.
Oh, that's amazing. So, okay, so let's go back to the webcam. Obviously, your first webcam, 45 million hits in that month. You're not getting images like that. But, in the spirit of high-performance teams using the concept of incremental gains to get there, you get the product out there and it's working. You get some early successes. 45 million views is amazing today. As you said, I mean, it would blow off anyone's web pages today too. But talk us through those first, those first days and first weeks and months getting this webcam up. What sort of images were you seeing? Did you have trouble with the system? Did it stay live all the time? Tell us about those early days.
Okay, so the early days, first of all, it's important to note that in those early days, it was not a business. We didn't think that it was a business. It was a hobby. And I say that because it's important to note that that through the years of doing this, oftentimes it wasn't a business. And there were many days when you could not call, where your costs exceed your revenue on a sustained basis. That is not good business. And it was important because it was always passion that kept it going. So the desire to share wildlife with people is what drives this and what has gotten us through these things, not money. This is not the best way to make a lot of money, I can assure you of that. But in those early days, what happened was that there was very little internet bandwidth available in remote locations. There still is very little, but then there was really very little, and it was really very hard. And also people at home, if were dialing up to the internet using dial-up modems, and so it was totally impossible to imagine that you could do something like watch Netflix or watch any kind of video. I mean, there was no ways you could watch video on the internet at that stage. And so what we did was we served a 30-second refreshing JPEG, basically just a still JPEG image, no audio. And every 30 seconds it would serve another image, and people would sit there and wait, and then wait, and then 30 seconds, oh, there's something there, or no, there isn't, and then they'd wait for the next one, and then boom, there's an elephant. And so it was a very different kind of time for us, and also everything was analog. Now, obviously, but when I say everything, when the video, which is what we had, we'd have an analog video camera up in a tree, running over coaxial cables, so sending a video, an analog video, not stream, but video feed down the line, and then it would be eventually it would get to a computer, and there it would be digitized for the first time as a JPEG. But prior to that, everything was analog, and we couldn't always have a wire running, obviously. So sometimes, for example, we wanted to have a trailer cam, which was our first mobile camera, which, in fact, no, the first was a wheelbarrow cam. The cam was in a wheelbarrow. And so it had to be wireless. And so we used analog microwave transmitters, which I haven't woken up in the middle of the night sweating about them for some years. I'm so grateful for. But honestly, these things were a nightmare because you never really had a good connection. All you had was a less bad one, and there was no real kind of logic often to why it would be good or less bad, and so these things, it was just like black magic, really. It was just lots of trying different things to try to make it work, but it was also a lot of fun, and it was incredibly gratifying to get such an instant response from an audience. A lot of times with filmmakers, you work on something behind the scenes for ages, and you put it out there, and you don't really know how it landed, Whereas live broadcasting, as you know, is so immediate that you can't hide your mistakes, and your successes are instantly obvious.
Okay. I want to just interrupt there, Graham. So in those early days there, you talked about headaches and sleepless nights and things. But what was the sense of success? So what did you feel or notice or hear from your audience that you realized that this was working and that you were improving it little bits? I mean, what was the feeling that you got as your team saying, yes, we're happy with that? I mean, I'm sure the picture of an image of an elephant rendering through, coming through on the webcam must have been one of those nice feelings. But what were the things that you noticed that said, it's worth my while putting more energy into this? We're making progress.
Yeah, it's a very good question, actually. And really cuts to the absolute core of this thing. I can tell you exactly what it is. It's the fact that quite often, not every day, but quite often, I get a message directly to me, usually, and all it is somebody in the world saying thank you, and often they'll say to me something like, and it's always different, but they'll say, the only reason that I get out of bed is to watch this. Or I'm in a hospice and I'm terminally ill and the only thing that keeps me alive are your broadcasts. Or several others, which, I mean, if I start telling the stories, I will literally start crying. But it's knowing that all the time out there are a whole bunch of people that rely on what we do. That it's critically important. It's not just a TV show. It's not just about, wow, I wonder what the next animal is going to be. It's the fact that the opportunity to connect with nature reliably every single day in the same places, to see the same animals, and oftentimes to have the same people telling you the stories and the same people watching at the same time as you, helps people who are suffering, who are lonely, who are depressed, who are trapped at home for whatever reason, or are in a place, either physically or virtually or mentally, that is not great. And I've learned how unbelievably powerful what we do is for those people, and that's what drives me.
Okay, so even in the beginning, those early days, those messages got to you, and you were able to just build on that energy. That's a great story, and then obviously it becomes relevant in today, in this last 2 or 3 months.
Totally.
So I'm trying to track a timeline of the story, but let's dive into today as well. COVID around the world, more people are locked down, and you guys have had a 5-fold increase in your traffic. It's obviously been good to get the message out there, but tell us about some of the experiences you've had being more and more and more on the global scene. I mean, you've been interviewed by CNN and all sorts. I mean, people all around the world are tuning in, thousands and thousands live every morning, every night. So tell us about this last sort of 10 weeks at WildEarth.
Yeah, so, well, I mean, I'm going to expand that a little bit, and particularly for your audience, because I think a lot of your audience are interested in the sort of the human story and what it takes to do these kinds of things. And I'm going to start really with last year. What happened was in June of last year, we lost our anchor tenant, if you will, which is National Geographic. Actually, hold on, let me just explain something. Okay. The way WildEarth makes its money, the way we pay the bills here, is that we license our a portion of our broadcasts to television broadcasters around the world as television shows. So as live television shows, just as what you see on YouTube or Twitch or Twitter or Facebook or wherever you watch WildEarth, if you watch WildEarth, we take that exactly and we license these shows to television broadcasters, and obviously they pay us. And then what we use is that money then helps us to fund the broadcasts that we do every single day, which are for free on all these various different platforms. Now, from 2014 to the middle of last year, National Geographic has been a long-term tenant, licensing lots of TV shows each year and all of our digital programming on a global non-exclusive basis. And then in June of last year, we lost them as a major tenant. And the reason for that was because we can't deliver a live African safari in daylight into the East Coast of the United States or into the UK primetime television.
Sure.
What we can do is we can only get in at about 11 o'clock at night or even at midnight on the East Coast, and to get into prime and we can't get into that all important between 8 and 10 p.m., which means that the ROI for our customer just wasn't good enough, and therefore we lost that income stream. And this put a huge amount of pressure on our business. I mean, suddenly, we become so addicted to that annuity income stream that when it disappeared, it was 99% of our revenue. It was cataclysmic. Now, we managed to secure a short-term arrangement with CCTV, which is one of the Chinese state broadcasters, and we delivered 14 live shows to them from Tanzania, South Africa, and Kenya in October of last year, and that kept the wolf from the door. But not for very long. And so, unfortunately, in October of last year, we had to retrench about 90% of our workforce, our staff, and move to a freelance basis, which is quite normal in both the safari and television industries, to be on a freelance basis. In order to get our costs down as much as possible, we renegotiated our various different access agreements. In other words, the traversing rights, the rights to actually put vehicles and drive around. We renegotiated those, and really, we took a machete to every cost we could. We had to.
Sure.
So essentially, WildEarth was preparing for this pandemic already last year.
Okay.
And then what happened was we reached out in November to our audience, and we asked them to help us to crowdfund so that we could keep running our daily safaris. Okay. And Alex, we had an overwhelming response. Honestly, it was an Indiegogo campaign where the generosity and support from our audience generated over 6 million rand in about a week.
Wow, that's amazing.
It is amazing, and it's a real testament to the incredible effort that everyone in this company has put in over the years to build that level of trust with our viewers. That in our hour of need, they were there, and they were there big. And then this got us through till sort of around February of this year, where once again we began to ask for audience support, which was again incredible support. And that meant we entered into this global lockdown much leaner than we had ever been. Much more focused than we'd ever been, with obviously many years of training and experience and equipment and relationships to back us up.
Sure.
And as this happened, of course, all of the tourists staying in all of these places all disappeared, went home. And so suddenly, what that meant was that we were the only ones out there. There were no other tourists out there. And very quickly, our audience just grew hugely in many parts due to South Africa. So while we saw a 5-fold growth in audience overall, we saw a 15-fold growth between March and April in just our South African audience. Yeah. To give you an idea, before the lockdown, 65% of our audience were coming from the United States and 5% from South Africa. Okay. By the end of April, a third of our audience were coming from the United States, which had doubled, and a third was now coming from South Africa.
That's amazing.
It was all because of a WhatsApp viral message, I think. And anyway, so and with all the South Africans then watching, this also a massive increase in our awareness and our utility, I suppose. We then were approached by And Beyond, who basically said, look, we want to share our nature with your audience. What can we do? And so we worked out an agreement with them. We've also added in Tswalu, in the Kalahari, which is actually where we broadcast for 2 years in 2011 to 12. We were there for 2 years filming the Meerkats.
Okay, I want to just interrupt you there for a second. Let's talk about Tswalu and the Meerkats there. We are all over the place. So here's a nice clip from Tswalu. Okay. And talking about the different locations, etc.
So what this little gang of Meerkats are part of the Xhosa gang, which they've actually got a Facebook page. You can look it up, Xhosa, G-O-S-A gang, and they are what is called a habituated group. That means that they are used to human beings. They are not tame. You can't put them on a leash and take them for a walk. They're not pets, but they are used to human beings, which allows us to get very close to them. These little guys we filmed for 2 years earlier, about a decade ago, and now we can still carry on with them, which is so exciting. And this is them early in the morning. They come out and they spend about a half hour warming up before they head off for their day of foraging. Amazing little animals.
Oh, amazing. So really what I'm trying to highlight here is that you've got these 2, 3, 4, 5 locations, and they're obviously quite diverse habitats as well. But also we can talk a bit about your guides here. And do you call them guides? What is their term in your team?
Yeah, they're primarily called guides. Although we did sort of change to naturalist, for a while, but they are guides, and they are naturalists, and it really it's a long story as to what that's about.
Okay.
But yeah, they are obviously crucial because they are the people that actually take people on these experiences.
Sure. Okay. So before we zoom in too much about that role, but there's clearly an interest from your naturalists. You know, they have their own favorites, obviously, but they also look at all sorts of things. So we've gone from a leopard and a leopard kill and cubs and small things. I'm going to show some more small things just now again, but you know, interested in the footprints and the leaves and the tiny things too, and that makes it quite a real experience. Like, as I can recall going diving, you know, you when you go diving the first time, you want to see the big things, and the next time you're looking at the colorful things, and the next time it's the big shoals, and then slowly you work your way down to you want to see what the nudibranchs look like and the little bits of coral, and I suppose it's a similar thing out there in the bush. You first want to see the big five, and then you want to see the related, and then you get smaller and smaller, and then you're looking at how does this tree grow, and that kind of thing. And your guides really bring that message across nicely, the naturalists, to say, well, look at this. I find this interesting because of whatever reason. So yeah, let's talk us through some of the interesting things. Here's another clip from that area, same guide, showing us a spider that was underground.
Yeah, look at that, eh? Yeah, that's a little spider trap. I don't know which spider it is, but you can see that that's its trap. And that's Dylan. So Dylan Smith, is one of the guides at Tswalu. He's been there forever. I mean, he really has been. I've known Dylan for a long time. He's very passionate about the bush, as you can see. And although he's only been on this with us for less than a month, he's already a firm favorite with a lot of our viewers. I think that, I mean, to speak to the guides, there's so much to say. I mean, I think the first thing to say is that WildEarth does not, we look for people that are qualified and experienced guides, not television presenters. It's important to note that you were talking earlier about how we cover all the small stuff and how a tree grows all the way up to, you know, the leopards and cubs and so on. And the reason is because we're not making a documentary. We're not making, a wildlife docu. We're just trying to faithfully recreate that experience of being on safari. It is, in essence, a simulation, and maybe I haven't grown up since I was 8 years old. and then what we're doing is we're not. So what we want people to feel, and I think they do, is that they're on the back of a safari vehicle. Nobody knows what's coming.
Sure.
We've got an expert here that is going to be able to tell us about what we're seeing, no matter what comes along, from the very smallest to the very biggest, and to contextualize it all. And so we really look for those people that are obviously knowledgeable and obviously are experienced, but above all are passionate about sharing nature. And that's what seems to work best.
And you're talking about not knowing what's coming. So here's a scene where they didn't know what was coming either. Let's listen to what he says here.
Away from us. These guys are little scaredy cats this morning. They don't want to be seen. So while we watch these little bottoms... Oh, there goes a leopard. A leopard. Do you see that? A leopard chased the ground hornbill. No ways. That's ridiculous.
So again, your thoughts on that. You know, they're in the moment. They're passionate, even though they see, well, maybe not exactly this kind of thing every day. They see a leopard lots of days. They see all the animals, but now, he's clearly excited by what he's seeing too, and it does feel real. You're right. You know, it feels like you're on the back of this game drive, and it's
exactly.
Yeah, it's
And you know what? And you know what the thing of it is that we as viewers don't necessarily know what's rare or what's exciting or what's out of the ordinary, and and a lot of our emotional reaction needs to be guided, or we need to be given cues, emotional cues. And that's what the guide does. And so obviously, when there's something that's exciting like that, then that's that enthusiastic response. But it's actually also very important in other situations. So, for example, our guides, the minute we come across wild dogs that are on the move, our guides will immediately start saying, look, for these animals are hunting, and wild dogs can be pretty vicious. And so if you are a squeamish viewer or you're uncomfortable with that sort of a thing, then now's the time to maybe go and make a cup of tea. And if there is a kill, we have what we call the circle of life speech, which is super important because, our viewers are, many of our viewers have not had the luxury of spending a lot of time in nature around predators and so on. And so for them, when they see a lion or a leopard kill an animal, it looks like murder, and it looks cruel. And it's very hard for some viewers to contextualize what's going on here without anthropomorphizing it, i.e. without putting our own human values and emotions into the situation.
Sure.
And it's crucial that a guide can be sensitive to those viewers. So, for example, you'll never see our guys fist pumping the air when there's a kill. You will see them, and it's important because they are excited. They live there all the time, and the opportunity to see something like that is a big deal. But our viewers wouldn't understand that. Yeah. So celebrating the death of another animal is not what we do, and rather what will happen is that guide will then calmly explain that in context. So the guide is not there to just give you facts. The guide is also there to help you emotionally through the story.
That's great. Another nice thing that they're good at is to just say, let's just enjoy the scenery where you are. Another clip here which focuses a bit on the sunset and just how it all played together in this evening game drive.
That sunset, that is in the distance, it is seriously pretty. This open clearing and their sunsets are some of the best that you'll get in this northern Sabi Sand sector. It sets straight over the Drakensbergs there, and especially with a bit of cloud like we've got tonight, the color is just out of
I think being able to have silence and allowing the viewers to connect in that way is quite a difficult thing, actually. The one reason is technical, and that is that it's a long story, but essentially there is a limit to how much atmospheric sound we can bring in. And the second thing is that, if it's your job to share and talk and explain, it's quite difficult to not do so. And so it's quite challenging. It's interesting, though, Alex, is that idea of silence is something that we're actually working on. And I don't know if you want to bring it up now, but I'll just allude to it.
Carry on.
Our vision is to create a 24-hour-a-day live television channel where it's basically what you've been seeing there, but it's just live. You don't know where it's coming from. There's no schedule. But at any time you can click in or watch it on your TV, and you'd be able to connect with nature from all around the world 24 hours a day. But right now, we've only got 2 3-hour live blocks of programming every day. And in the next month or so, we're going to be launching a TV channel. And in between that is going to be just hold on a second. Josh, sorry, I'm just on an interview. Sorry. So anyway, so the in between those live broadcasts, we've been making for the last few months a whole bunch of these blue chip clips, which are, you don't ever see people, you don't ever see anything man-made, but each one is a story. It could be the crossing of the Mara River. It could just be a couple of elephants walking across the plains. Each one is a story, but there's no narration. There's only atmospheric sounds and ever so little bits of music every now and again to just provide a bit of an emotional cue. And what's so interesting about this is that the minute you take away that narration, what happens is we, as the viewer, we start projecting into that what we see the story as being. I think it is a way to really get the viewer to engage more with the experience by not having someone talk. Now, I'm not suggesting that that's the way we would make the whole safari. Of course not. But we have toyed with it, and in the past we've done something called a silent safari, which is where we go for a drive for an hour or two, and you can hear what's going on, but no one talks.
Okay. Is this on the live feed?
Yeah. We've also done one which is where we put the lens cap on the bushwalk. We don't have a bushwalk at the moment, but it'll be back shortly. But where we put the lens cap on the bushwalk, which meant that now you couldn't see anything. And now the guide was forced to explain everything. Okay. And this was inspired by somebody who'd gone on a game drive who was blind. And the guide had to describe what a lion looked like. And I just suddenly thought, now, wow, that's interesting. Yeah. So we really work hard to try and find ways for the viewer to be as participate as much as possible, and to find their story in everything.
It sounds amazing. I mean, but also I just want to back up a little bit again and talk about some of the sort of technical challenges and really celebrate the sort of team dynamic and the incremental gains aspect to this channel to where you are today. First thing is to recognize this isn't something that started during lockdown, 22 years in the making. But let me just play this little clip, and you can just give people a sense of some of the challenges you've come up against before. And I mean, people don't know that you ran an underwater live show too.
Yes, so this is my passion is diving. So I've been trying to get live diving going for a very long time, and we've had a variety of different issues. One of the big challenges with diving is that I don't know if it'll be visible on this clip. You don't even have a clip where you've got somebody who's actually underwater that's talking from underwater, do you?
No, I just have this turtle and then the squid just now. I don't have the people in the shot. Okay. Sorry.
So anyway, one of the big challenges here was that we needed to have somebody that could talk. But the problem is that if you talk underwater, you've got to do so obviously in a full face mask, and very quickly your CO2 levels build up. This creates cognitive problems, i.e. you don't think as well as the CO2 level goes up, but also you get properly out of breath. And so what was happening was it was not possible for us to run a dive with the diver underwater talking all the time. So we added another marine biologist on the surface that could then have a conversation. I love these squids. This is in Grand Cayman as well. And we had a conversation so that now it was a two-handed affair, and that worked a lot better. This was a crowd-funded project. We did it in Grand Cayman for 4 months in 2018, Dive Live, and it's going to come back, not as Dive Live, but it's going to come back as part of our channel that we're
Wonderful. Yeah, so if you'd listened into one of the conversations, you can hear when the diver's speaking, obviously, because there's the regulator that's going on and off the whole time, and you can hear the other person sounds a bit more studio-like. So obviously there were some technical challenges to get that right. But when we were talking before the show, you said you were not actually the first, but the first live diving experience was in the 70s. That sounds unbelievable.
Yeah, well, actually, not only just the first underwater diving experience. The first live wildlife was a badger set done by the BBC, which they broadcast live on television in 1976. Sure. Then I do think it was 2 years later, in 1978, that they did something called Reef Watch, which is where a couple of presenters with these big bubble on their heads would go down underwater, and they could then talk. And this was in Eilat in the Red Sea, and they broadcast from there a few times. So that was the first time it was ever broadcast from underwater.
Oh, that's wonderful. Okay, so Graham, now we look at this big, long, expensive career of 20-odd years. You mentioned at the end of last year, losing a big key tenant, especially with sort of 90% of your revenue. That's a big slump. But talk us through any of the other sort of pitfalls along the way. You've mentioned before you had a team that was 120 strong and vaporized to nothing. I mean, tell us through the sort of learnings of those big failures and how you bounce back up, how you wake up the next day fighting fit. How do you shake that off and get ready for the next thing?
Yeah. So yes. So first of all, this whole concept has been very challenging because it has been very difficult to match revenue with costs, and that's been because the evolution of streaming, both technically and commercially, over the past 20 years has been dramatic. For example, it wasn't even possible to insert an ad into a video stream until late 2008. And if you can imagine that if you're sending a stream, if you're broadcasting a stream to someone, not on YouTube, I'm talking about now, this is before YouTube.
Yeah.
If you're doing that, then that stream is coming off of your servers, and so you're paying for that bandwidth to go to the customer,
yes,
to the viewer. And if you've got a banner ad that gets served up at the top of the page when they start that stream, that means you're getting probably $3 or $4 per every 1,000 people that open that page. And then you're only getting it at the beginning. So then if they then start the stream up and they start watching, the longer they watch for, in other words, the better quality your content is, and ours has always been pretty good, means that people have long viewing sessions, which means that the longer they watch for, i.e. the better your content is, the more money you lose. And that was the problem until late 2008. Okay, and don't think that just because suddenly the pre-roll ad was invented, the in-stream ad was invented in 2008, and that magically solved the problem. It didn't. It just meant that it was technically impossible to have a successful streaming company prior to 2008 that was advertising funded. And so what we've dealt with here is a business which on the one hand couldn't work, and on the other hand didn't want to die. Okay, and it didn't want to die because of a combination of the value it had in the lives of a lot of people around the world, and at the other hand, the team, myself, Emily, Peter, and others, I'll tell you about our team in a moment, that wouldn't let it go, even when wiser people, said that this is not a business. And I think that's the key to our success. The key to our success is that we didn't do this to make money. We make money to be able to do this. And the difference between those two is utterly crucial in this modern world. If your objective is money, then don't do something like this.
Yeah.
And I mean, it doesn't make any sense. You can't make money your objective. Money is just fuel that you use to achieve a goal.
Sure. So especially if you're trying to create the new thing, if the technology isn't, it's almost like the technology is not even there to support you yet and you're starting, then you really, how to create the whole sponsorship model, advertising, etc. That wasn't there when you started it. So you can't start with the money in the front. But let's talk about that team now. Graham, you've brought up the team. So you are a high performance team. You've got offices in Johannesburg. You've got game drives in Kruger, in Sabi, in Tswalu. It's broadcast via London. I mean, this is a complex integration, and bearing in mind it's all live twice a day, every day, for year in, year out. So tell me about the team and the roles.
Okay, so first of all, the roles. So there are 4 key roles that are involved in each broadcast, and then there's a whole bunch of roles that support those roles. So those 4 key roles are obviously the guide, so that you can see, and that's obvious. And we discussed them briefly previously. The second role is obviously the camera person, and it's important to note there's only one camera per unit or vehicle. Could be a boat, could be a bushwalk, could be a vehicle as you currently see. And those units only ever have one camera on them, and that's really important because part of our format, I guess, is to create that feeling that you're on the back of the vehicle, which means that we must not cut between cameras in a sighting, because that's what happens on television.
Okay.
Psychologically, the viewer, when they come to that sighting, must stay in one camera in order for them to feel like they're there. The minute you start cutting them, they start thinking they're watching television, which puts them back in their lounge. And so one camera person. that camera person is a very important role because that person is got to trust that guide 100%. You are on an open vehicle, and in the low felt we use short wheelbase 90s where there are no sides on them. There's no roof, and you are sitting right out there in the open, with the animals, and so you've got to have a lot of trust with the guide. But you've also got to be listening, and you've got to be focusing on what's going all the time, because there are all sorts of little rules that we have. As for example, if we're broadcasting a television show and a question is asked, then you've got to reposition so that there's space for the question box, for example. Mm-hmm. It is a 3 hour in the morning and 3 hour in the afternoon, 100% focused time, and so it is a challenging role, that being a camera operator. And one of the biggest challenges are that after your first tour, and most people work in 6 weeks on, 2 weeks off cycles, but after your first tour, the first time, you're amped because it's so glamorous. I'm a wildlife cameraman. I'm live. It's just amazing, and I'm out in the bush. But as the months roll by, that glamour, wears off a little. And then what counts is your ability to go out and do the same thing every day, twice a day, and not let that routine kill you. And that's not for everyone. Then the third role is two people in the director 1 and director 2, or as we call them, D1 and D2. Okay. These are I don't actually know why, but in our business they are always women, always. Okay. Or literally, I think that I can count on one hand, the number of exceptions to that rule over the last decade and a bit. Oh. So they're always women, and they and so the D1's role is to stay in contact constantly with the guides and camera operators. So you'll have seen that all the guides have got a little earpiece in their ear. That's the director, and also all the camera operators do. And she can communicate with individual units or groups. She's got a very complex radio management system which allows her to communicate with all of these. And this is a normal VHF radio system. It's our comm system, but it links all of our repeaters. So we've got two in a Masai Mara, we've got one in Swalu, we've got one in Djuma, and one in Johannesburg control room, which means that you can pick up a radio and communicate with any of our teams anywhere in that system, as if you were just talking on the radio, because they're linked by the internet. Wow. And her role is to really cut the show. So she's deciding where we are and where we're going to next. She is making the decisions about when certain things that need to be played out in the show are played out, and she's directing the show. She's also cutting between the feeds. She's running a TriCaster. It's called a TriCaster, that she can manage all the feeds and everything in there. Then sitting right next to her is also a lady in the role of D2. This is Director 2. And her role is to manage all of the interactivity. Uh-huh. And so she is monitoring all the various different endpoints. So Twitch, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, etc. And also emails coming in from kids, questions. And then she's got to manage those in terms of deciding what are the most relevant questions. And she provides up to 10 of those at a time to D1, who has that on a separate screen where she can see all the questions. And then she is able to decide, okay, I'm going to send this question here. And so D1 and D2 work very closely. And those questions are crucial because obviously they're crucial to the viewers because they want to hear the questions answered. But they're actually also very crucial because they allow the directors to direct the show. They control the narrative through the questions. And so what questions are sent through to which guides is how they are effectively helping the guide to guide the conversation. And so they're all important roles, but obviously those two are really important roles. Then also sitting next to them in the final control is the fourth role, and that is the support engineer. And the support engineer's job is to be responsible for all contribution feeds. So those are all the feeds coming in from the various different units. And they all come in different ways. Some of them are coming via mobile networks. Some of them are coming in via over DVB-T networks. I mean, there's a variety of different ways that those can land. And also, there's a whole bunch of outgoing distribution streams as well, which are going to various places and in various ways. And that whole network is managed by the support engineer, and he. I don't know. It's not always a he. There are some she's, but it's usually a he there. His or her role is to just really be out there on the edge of the network, making sure that the whole thing holds together throughout the whole process.
Yes.
That is it. So what's very important to note is that myself and Emily, who runs the content team, the production team, and Peter Braat, who is our chairman and CTO as well, and is integrally involved with Alex, who runs the tech team, and all of that management, and Steph, who's our operations manager, are not involved. Are not involved. Because when that broadcast begins, everybody, because we do it every single day, 365 days a year, twice a day, and the machine never stops. Because it never stops, it means that there are no indispensable people. There are, because we can't have indispensable people in a system that has to run every single day, and that we do not micromanage. If we want to make a change to the format or respond to something, that is done between shows, not in shows. And everybody knows their place. Everybody trusts what everybody else is going to be doing, and that they're going to be doing it. And that we go through like a ritual, half hour beforehand, which is where we do pre-flight checks. And yes, we do call them pre-flight checks, even though usually nothing gets airborne. Usually. So the whole team goes through a whole pre-flight check on every single piece of equipment, on themselves, their temperature, how they're feeling, are they ready, do you have all their pieces together? And this process bonds the whole team. It's a bit like the way lions groom before going on the hunt. Okay. And that bonds the whole team. And after that, everyone knows their place, and off they go. And we, that's how we do it.
It sounds fascinating, Graham. It sounds really like it's well thought out, and you're obviously given enough trust. You have enough trust in the team to give them that sort of complete autonomous responsibility to go out and produce the show with the significant players, chief executive, and content producer and ops officer standing back and allowing the frontline people to get on with it. At any one time on these live game drive broadcasts, how many vehicles are out there? What is it? Does it up and down, or is it always 5, or what is the number?
It's always varying. At the moment, it's constantly going up. I think that this afternoon there will be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay. 6 vehicles out this afternoon.
Okay, so all right, so it's a nice option as well to jump between shots, and while one person is getting across to another area, that's a nice opportunity to have that many to call upon. And is it focused on Kruger and Swallow, or is the Masai still part of this feed currently?
Currently, the Masai is not there, but what we have added from yesterday is Pinda, which is obviously in KwaZulu-Natal. Then we've got, as you said, one feed coming out of Tswalu. We don't have any feeds coming out of the Kruger National Park. We're not in the Kruger National Park. We're in the Greater Kruger Park, which is an important distinction, because we have 2 feeds coming out of the Sabi Sands. That's Djuma Game Reserve, and they traverse Djuma, Chitwa, and Simbambili. And then we've got another team at and Beyond's Ngala Private Game Reserve, which is part of the Greater Kruger as well. It's only 30 kilometers north of Djuma, but is not in the Kruger Park. Okay, sure. And then it's next door. Then then we have another one which is in Pride Lands, which is right at Hoedspruit, which is also part of the Greater Kruger, but it's an awfully long way to the Kruger Park from there. And then there is one feed coming out of Tswalu at the moment.
All right. Now, Graham, it's been fascinating. I've got so many more questions, but I want to just leave you with 2 more questions, and then we will have to make it to episode 2. Just to understand, yes, that's a thumbs up for episode 2. Thanks.
Yeah.
Just to understand the sort of roles and responsibility of these rangers, naturalists in the park.
Yeah.
Are they obviously trained in the ability to be a ranger before you employ them? Is your cameraman also trained in the sort of ranger principles? Are they educated enough, or are they relying on the naturalist in front to look after them should any situation develop?
Yeah, I mean, we do not employ camera operators on the basis that they are also guides. But what happens is that after years and years of doing this, there's no question that camera operators become very, very... they may not have as much knowledge as the guides, but their ability to read, say, elephant, or to read a situation is as good. No question about it. But at the end of the day, those guides are the ones making the decisions about how you're going to position that vehicle, and therefore there must be trust, because you know, and it's very, I'm trying to think if I can think of a situation where there was a breakdown in that trust, and I can't. But it would be difficult. You can imagine if you're sitting on the back of that vehicle and you do not trust the person who's driving you around, that they're going to make the right decisions and read things correctly. That could cause a problem. And not because of a lack of trust, but we have had a situation years ago where an elephant, popped its tusks into one of our vehicles and just missed the guide, went behind the guide, and just missed the leg of the camera operator. So that was scary. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I mean, yeah. So that trust is a big thing. As we just discussed, I'm going to ask you the last question. I'll put this night shot coming through just to show that you have a whole variety of different cameras and scenes. This is about another 90 seconds of clip. We can just talk over the lines there. So you've obviously created this team, and it's been a long journey with lots of ups and downs. And in some respects, October, November, December last year gave you a chance to be lean and mean, fighting fit to face COVID. A lot of industries all around the world, particularly tourism, are taking a massive hammering, and it'll take a long time to recover. Yeah. What are your top tips in creating the high-performance teams?
My top tips in creating high-performance teams are to employ people that you can trust and who know what they're doing, and then trust them to do it. I think that an important tip for a high performance team also is that you need to get people to do something every single day and make it part of routine, make it normal, if you want to make it great. If you take the approach that we're all going to plan and talk and meet and discuss, and then we're going to do something, you've got a high chance of that thing not being what you want it to be. But if it's done every single day and it becomes normal, then you can really push a team higher and higher and higher.
If I can paraphrase you there, would you accept my paraphrasing of what you've said there? Is incremental gains. You just every day do it again and just improve that little bit.
Absolutely. Incremental gains. But it's not just incremental gains. You've first got to be doing it every day. So it's important that, like you fly, right? I mean, if sitting around and talking about it isn't going to make you a better pilot. And it's that continuous doing that I think is such an important part of building a great high-performance team.
Great. Trust and continuous activity. Graham, it's been wonderful chatting to you. I think we should leave it there and schedule episode 2. When you're the next thing, the live dive, or you get that next venue. But certainly there's lots more to talk about. I thank you so much for your time today, and I appreciate it. And good luck for what's going forward too.
Thank you very much, Alex. It's been great chatting with you. It's been great watching your burgeoning show. And I know that I don't know if I'm convinced you're going to be doing some super exciting stuff as well. So good luck, mate, and really appreciate it. Keep on going. Eh?
Thanks, Graham. All the best. Well, folks, thank you for joining. It's been a wonderful, wonderful chat, and certainly episode 2, maybe even 3 is lined up in the future. Please remember to subscribe and share and put it out there to anyone who might be interested in all things high performance, aviation, wildlife, and everything in between. Until next time, please stay safe.